She put herself up for sale for a prosthetic leg, but no one wanted the broken alien girl, except him.
Gorith, 7 had once been a supply moon, a logistical midpoint between orbital cities and distant colonies. Now it was barely holding together. Most domes had cracked. Pressure seals were patched with scrap. The salvage district was the only place still breathing, barely. The wind sounded like grinding metal. It moved through half-collapsed structures and sent clouds of red dust through the tilted alleyways. Power relays buzzed overhead. Light came in flickers, sometimes white, sometimes a sickly orange, like warning strobes caught in a loop. Valari sat beneath the remains of a merchant wall, a slab of alloy bolted crooked between 2 steel columns. She'd chosen this spot because it had a back panel and half a roof. It kept the worst of the weather off. That morning, she had drawn a message on a strip of cloth in old field ink. She tied it around her chest, over the faded remains of a combat-wrapped tunic. The message was short. I can cook, clean, fix machinery, warm your bed. Just please give me a prosthetic leg. She was missing her right leg from just above the knee. 3 years ago, she was a planetary guard officer. Valari Division, Site 14 Security. When a reactor near her station collapsed, her unit was written off as an acceptable loss. No evac, no medical recovery. The higher-ups buried the incident in a trade dispute report and moved on. Valari survived, but barely. Crawled out. Got airlifted by a junker crew that dumped her outside a dome on Gorith. 7 when they saw she didn't have cyber credit tags. That was 9 months ago. Since then, she had stayed alive on scraps and barter. Her name wasn't on any registry. No birthright. No citizen credentials. The leg she lost had been a clean burn, but with no way to pay, no one had ever offered a replacement. So now, she sat with one leg, wearing the torn remains of her old uniform, holding her back straight to keep from collapsing. Even now, pride kept her spine rigid, but it was burning away. She wasn't enslaved. No collar, no chains, but she had still written the offer. Not because she was giving up, but because she didn't know what else to do. Throughout the day, dozens passed her. Some barely noticed her. Others stared too long. A group of scrappers threw a handful of expired ration tabs at her and laughed. She didn't move, didn't pick them up. Then a figure slowed. Not loud, not hurried, just steady. He wore a reinforced work jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbow, utility pants patched to the knees. The jacket had a faded emblem stitched into the left breast, a symbol Valari didn't recognize, but military of some kind. His face was clean-shaven except for a short line of stubble along his jaw. His right eye had a small scar beneath it. Hands rough, knuckles scarred. He wasn't large, but something about the way he stood said, capable. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. Then, you'll freeze out here when the next wind shift hits. She said nothing. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask what happened. Instead, he unzipped the pack strapped to his back and pulled out a folded coat. It was thermalined, clearly worn, but intact. He bent down and laid it in front of her. I'm not trading, not negotiating. If you want to come inside, you can. I've got heat, water, food. No one else there. He stood again, took a few steps back, gave her space. She stared at him. Her leg was starting to cramp. She could feel every inch of exposed skin now. The sharp temperature drop was real. The coat looked too warm to trust. He didn't move. Finally, she reached for it. Her hand shook. He gave her one short nod, turned, and began walking. Not fast. He didn't look back to see if she followed. That's what made her trust it. She grabbed her makeshift crutch, an old industrial pipe with a rubber tip jammed into the base, and stood with difficulty. Her bad leg spasmed once. She caught her breath, steadied. The walk to his shelter took nearly 10 minutes. Every step ground into her hips. She hated being seen like this, limping, slow, exposed. She stayed 5 meters behind him. He never turned around. The shelter was beneath a maintenance outpost on the edge of the salvage district. Hidden under a collapsed rail bridge, it had a reinforced hatch marked with faded hazard tape. He keyed it open and held it as she came in. The air inside was warmer. Filtered. There was a humming from the far end. A purifier or generator. She stepped into the space slowly, eyes scanning. It was one large room, half mechanics workshop, half medical bay. Tools hung in magnetic rows. A low cot sat under a heating panel. Cybernetic limbs in various stages of construction were suspended from ceiling brackets, their servo joints exposed. The floor was concrete, worn, stained, but clean. He motioned to a bench and said, "Sit." She sat, slowly. He went to a small prep unit and returned with a metal bowl filled with thick stew. Placed it in front of her, a spoon beside it. No words. She stared, then took one cautious bite. Salt, heat, protein, real food. As she ate, he began working at the bench again. Quietly, focused, no questions. It was the first time in weeks she wasn't waiting to be touched or ordered or dismissed. "Name's Edwin Dorn," he said finally, not looking up. "Used to be field medic. Human Defense Corps, long time ago." She nodded, swallowing. "Valari." He looked at her then. "I know that name. Valari Unit. Combat Ops." She nodded once. 14th Planetary Guard. "You were stationed near the reactor spill?" "Yes." He didn't ask how she survived. Instead, "You allergic to any adhesives or metals?" She blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm going to start building you a leg." No offer. No pitch. Just fact. She stared. Emotions surged so fast it made her stomach turn. She couldn't decide if it was fear, relief, or shame. Maybe all of it. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know your posture. I know you've been sitting wrong to avoid pressure on your stump. I know you used combat-grade field dressing, probably from a standard issue kit. That says something. You think I'm worth fixing? I think you're not broken." Silence. That night, she lay on the cot. He took the bench. No blankets traded. No expectations. He didn't watch her. She stared at the ceiling. Her thoughts looped. Why is he helping? Why no price? What's the trick? What if it's real? What if he sees me? Her chest hurt more than her leg. But she didn't leave. For the first time in months, she slept in a room with heat and locked doors. Not to keep her in, but to keep everything else out. The silence of the shelter wasn't empty. It was deliberate. It gave Valari room to think and Edwin the space to work. Morning came dimly through the grated hatch window, filtered by cracked skylights and a dust-heavy atmosphere. The heating panel hummed low behind her. Her body still ached, but not from exposure. For the first time in months, her skin wasn't cold. The cot beneath her creaked as she sat upright and looked around. The bench where Edwin had worked last night was now cleared. A tray sat beside it, stacked with gauze, sealant foam, and sterilizer tools. She instinctively touched her thigh, feeling the tender skin of the stump through the wrapping. She'd lost that leg 17 months ago. For all that time, no one had looked at it with anything other than disgust or opportunity. But Edwin had measured it with care. Not hesitation, not pity. She heard light footsteps approaching from a side corridor. Edwin emerged carrying a cup. Not military style, but ceramic. White chipped. "Water," he said simply, offering it. She took it without a word. He nodded toward the workbench. "I'll need to rewrap your stump today. It'll help the fit when I finish the limb." She stared at him. Her voice came slow, unsure. "You already started building it?" "Last night." He pulled a cloth off a surface nearby, revealing a partial prosthetic. Matte metal frame, lightweight composite, flexible servo joints. "I had components in reserve. Enough to start. This is custom, not off-shelf. That wouldn't work with your gait." She hadn't expected this kind of detail. She hadn't expected him to understand her biomechanics. Her brow furrowed. "Why are you doing this?" Edwin paused, then shrugged. "Because you asked." "No, I didn't ask you. I sat under a dome and waited for someone desperate enough to take the offer. You weren't desperate. You just saw someone sitting wrong, favoring their left hip, holding their ribs too tight, like they'd cracked once and never healed right." Valari looked away. The scars were real. Her ribs had fractured in the reactor collapse, and they'd healed crooked. He continued, "I've seen that posture before. On people who were trying to stay alive, not try to get chosen. You weren't selling yourself. You were surviving. There's a difference." She didn't speak. He didn't need her to. He turned and pulled gloves on. We should get started before pressure shifts again. The outer dome's been whining. Could be a fault line about to shift. She adjusted the red cloth around her waist and moved carefully to the bench. Sitting down made her wince. Her residual legs still throbbed from overuse. Edwin knelt beside her, opened the med case, and peeled back her dressing with slow, practiced movements. She braced herself, but there was no sharp intake of breath from him. No reaction at all, just quiet, methodical care. "Looks clean," he said. "You did good keeping it dry." It was luck. No, it was discipline. I've seen bad amputations. Yours held. He applied a numbing agent and began cleaning the tissue. She watched his hands. Steady, confident, but not careless. "Where did you get your medical training?" she asked. "Combat field work. Then off-grid contract runs. I fixed what others broke. Sometimes under fire. Sometimes worse. Why stay here? Gorith, 7 is dying." "I know. Then why haven't you left?" He didn't answer right away. He focused on securing the last band of gauze, then rose and walked toward his side of the room. "I stayed because there are always people who can't leave. Someone has to make sure they don't rot in the walls." She watched him for a long time. "You lost someone here?" "Not here. Somewhere like it." That was all he said. He returned to the table and held up the frame of the prosthetic. "Do you want to try the test fit socket today, or wait until the nerd gel sets?" "I can handle the test. You don't have to prove anything." She met his gaze. "I know, but I want to." He nodded. The rest of the morning passed in a rhythm. He fitted the first frame bracket to her thigh, carefully aligning the socket. Each touch was announced before contact. She noticed that, how he spoke before acting, giving her room to say no. The device powered on once attached, emitting a low, responsive hum. She gasped, not in pain, but in shock, feeling something move again beneath her body, something hers, something she controlled. It pulled a crack open in her defenses. She didn't cry, not yet, but she blinked faster. Edwin helped her stand. The first step was unstable, her hips off-center. But he didn't rush her. Her body wobbled, caught itself, found a rhythm. 2 steps. 3. On the 4th, she stumbled hard. He moved fast, caught her into the arms. She hissed, humiliated. But his voice was calm. "That's how it works. You fall. You adjust." She looked up at him, breathless. "What if I don't adjust?" "Then I build it again until you do." He wasn't trying to impress her. He meant it. That evening, she insisted on making the meal. He watched from the bench while she moved carefully around the compact cooking unit, using her new leg in short, careful motions. He didn't comment on her efforts, didn't tell her good job, or offer encouragement like she was a child. He just asked for more water when his glass ran low. She appreciated that more than she knew how to say. Later, as she sat with her bowl, she finally asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since the night before. "Do you expect anything?" He looked over. "From what?" "From me. For the leg. The food. Shelter." He held her gaze. "No." She waited. Nothing else came. "Everyone expects something," she said quietly. "I'm not everyone." "Then what are you?" He leaned back, pulled off his gloves, and finally answered. "I'm someone who's not trying to fix you. I'm just giving you your tools back. What you do with them is up to you." That night, she sat awake long after the lights dimmed. She didn't understand him. She didn't trust the simplicity of it. But for the first time since Site 14 collapsed, she felt her body becoming hers again. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or gave her something dangerously close to hope. The third day began with tremors. Subtle at first, barely noticeable shifts underfoot, as if the ground beneath Gorith. 7 were exhaling. But Edwin noticed. He paused while calibrating the feedback sensors on Valari's prosthetic and placed 2 fingers against the wall. His jaw tightened. "It's the outer sublevels," he said. "They're sagging." Valari steadied herself against the workbench, one hand gripping the edge. Her balance was improving, but not perfect. Is it structural failure or environmental breach? Could be both. This dome's decades out of spec. We lose one sublevel. It'll cascade through the lower utility grid. They'll evacuate the trade ring. Or seal it. That includes us. She processed the risk fast. How much time? Could be hours. Could be a week. He looked her over. We should move soon, but we'll need you mobile first. Really mobile. She nodded. Her nerves lit up, not just from the urgency, but from the way he included her in the plan. Not as cargo, not as someone to be carried, but as part of the escape. Equal footing. The next few hours were pure repetition. Edwin set up movement drills, small at first. Steps, pivots, weight shifts, then more advanced tasks, stepping across scattered tools, navigating uneven flooring. She fell twice. The second time, she didn't wait for him to help. She pushed herself upright, jaw clenched. Edwin watched her closely, silent. Not judging, just assessing. The way a technician would monitor a precision system coming back online. While she rested, he worked on the final leg casing, a lightweight blend of alloy and shock-absorbing mesh that could survive a sprint, a climb, or a fall. She noticed him adding something to the inside of the upper brace. "What is that?" she asked. "Shock suspension layer, but also something else." He turned the leg and showed her a set of small etchings on the inner shell, Valari lettering, written in careful, sharp lines. She leaned in. It was her full name, rank, and former designation. "Only 2 people in my unit ever call me by rank," she said quietly. "They're both dead." "You're not," he replied, "and I don't think you were meant to stay broken." She stared at him for a long moment. "You looked that up?" "I asked a local slicer to run a match. Had to bribe him with water filters. Took him 2 days." He shrugged. "I wanted to know who I was building it for." Emotions surged hard in her chest, sharper than she was ready for. Not because of the gesture, but because he had done it without telling her. No announcement, no grand reveal. He had remembered her name before she remembered it herself. Later, while she practiced again, she finally asked a question she'd been avoiding since the first night. "Why didn't you leave with the rest of them?" Edwin didn't pretend to misunderstand. He just looked at the far wall. "I used to run evac missions. Outer colonies. We'd land during sieges, pull out survivors. I got good at organizing triage, fast liftoffs, limbs, stasis, all of it. One day we were delayed. For minutes. Just 4. 2 kids died. One was already halfway onto the ramp when we pulled away." He didn't flinch while he spoke, but his hands had stilled. "After that, I stopped moving. Started fixing instead." Valari didn't interrupt. She let the weight sit in the room for a few seconds. "That's why you live under a salvage dome?" He met her eyes. "Some people run. Some people pay. Some people stay and build." She thought about that long after he returned to his tools. That night, she slept more soundly. Her body didn't scream with every shift. The new joint had adjusted perfectly. The pain had faded to background noise. Her dreams were less violent. Not peaceful, but quieter. She woke before him the next morning and found herself staring at him from the cot. He was asleep on the floor against the bulkhead, jacket draped over his chest. His hand rested near his toolkit, as if he'd passed out while mid-repair. He looked different asleep, less like a soldier, more like someone who had spent years trying to do too much with too little. She stood slowly, walked without thinking. No pain, no limp. She didn't need the wall. She didn't realize she was crying until her breath caught. When Edwin stirred, he found her already moving around the room, cleaning, sorting, checking the vent seals. "You don't need to," he began. "I know," she interrupted. "That's why I'm doing it." That simple statement settled between them. Not obligation, not barter, choice. By noon, he handed her a compact satchel with rations, 2 water cartridges, and a folded coat. "We move tonight," he said. "Power fluctuations will spike around midnight. It'll give us cover. What's our route?" "Emergency ladder through subsector 9, then out via the secondary transit shaft. It leads above collapse level. If it holds, we're in the clear. And if it doesn't, then we run together or we fall together." She stared at him. "That's not protocol." "No, it's not." As the lights flickered again and the walls groaned with the weight of the dying dome, they packed in silence. But it wasn't tense. It was focused. She checked the prosthetic's power reserves twice, adjusted the pressure clamps. She wasn't afraid of walking anymore. Wasn't afraid of being seen limping or failing. What scared her now, quietly, deeply, was that someone had finally looked at her and seen more than damage. And she wasn't sure if she could live with losing that now. The alarm started 5 hours earlier than expected. It wasn't the high-pitched wail of a controlled evacuation. It was blunt, raw, an unfiltered klaxon that echoed unevenly across the inner salvage corridors. Emergency lights pulsed red against the cracked metal walls, casting jagged shadows that twitched with every movement. Edwin was already at the door, clipping down the final gear to his belt. Valari had her satchel over one shoulder and both hands steady at her sides. Her body moved differently now, centered, lean, almost too calm. They jumped the pressure purge, Edwin muttered. Someone screwed up the seal sequence. They'll collapse the sublevels. Then we don't wait. He hit the override switch. The hatch hissed open with a sluggish grind. The passage outside was narrow, lined with pipes and overhead cabling. Dust clouded the air, dancing in the emergency light beams. They moved quickly, side by side. Edwin carried a portable transponder in one hand, a hacked beacon that pinged dome instability every 60 seconds. Valari didn't ask questions now. She followed his pace, focused on each step. Her prosthetic leg hummed quietly beneath her, responsive, balanced. For the first time, she wasn't calculating every footfall. The limb felt like hers. They turned into Corridor 6B, where a large rupture had exposed the maintenance tunnel wall. A tangle of debris blocked part of the walkway. "We'll have to climb through," Edwin said. "No way around." Valari didn't wait. She scanned the blockage, found a path, and began moving up the debris stack. It was jagged, old beams, pipework, split cable clusters, but she climbed quickly, efficiently. Her grip was confident. Her leg pivoted naturally. She didn't hesitate at the edge. Edwin followed a second behind. When they dropped down the other side, they landed in ankle-deep water. Cold, chemical-laced. She winced as it soaked through her thermal wrappings. They pushed on. 2 turns later, the passage narrowed into a rusted ladder shaft. A broken access panel hung off one side. Edwin pulled it away with a grunt and gestured upward. "This leads to the transit bridge, if that still exists. Let's find out." She started climbing first. Midway up, the structure groaned. A muffled thunder echoed through the substructure. Below them, something gave way, a dull collapse. She didn't stop. Neither did he. They emerged in a shattered corridor. A long skylight once ran the length of the ceiling, now fractured. Shards of glass crunched under their boots. On one side, a freight elevator had been ripped open. Beyond it, a long drop into blackness. Edwin pointed. "Bridge nodes through that corridor. But if the power cells blew..." "We walk," she said. He looked at her. Her voice was calm, certain. So they walked. The corridor was uneven, tilted from pressure shift. Steam poured from ruptured valves. They passed 2 bodies. No faces visible, only outlines and soot and oil. Valari didn't pause. She wasn't numb. She just didn't need to look. Edwin glanced at her. "You okay?" "No," she said. "But I'm functioning." He nodded. It was the right answer. The bridge came into view, half collapsed but passable. One end dipped slightly like a bent rib. It arched over a loading bay now filled with rising water. Lights flickered on the far end, barely illuminating the other side. Halfway across, the floor shuddered. Valari braced. "Structural crack. Move fast but stable," Edwin said. "Don't run. Just move." They reached the midpoint when the support beam behind them gave out. The whole bridge dropped half a meter. Valari lost balance first. Her prosthetic caught on an exposed bracket. She fell sideways, hitting hard. Her arm caught the edge. "Valari, I'm fine, go," she shouted. Edwin didn't. Instead, he dropped to one knee, yanked her free, and pulled her upright. They ran the last meters together. No time to think. The bridge groaned one final time and collapsed behind them. They hit the ground on the far side, rolled, and stopped under the safety arch of a collapsed checkpoint. Silence. Then a slow, rising breath from both of them. She looked over at him. His hand was bleeding, a shallow gash across the palm. She took it without asking and pulled a dressing from her satchel. "You always this stubborn," she said while wrapping the wound. Only when someone tells me to leave them behind. Her hands paused. She looked at him fully now, stood on his face, jaw locked, sweat running down his neck. You could have made it faster alone. He met her gaze. You don't get it, do you? I didn't bring you out of that dome. You walked. She swallowed. Her voice dropped. You built the leg. You moved it. You fell, and you stood up again. That's not mine. Something cracked open in her chest then. The pressure of the last 2 days, the silence, the disbelief, the unprocessed hope hit her all at once. I didn't think I'd ever be this person again, she whispered. You never stopped being her, he said. She pressed the final edge of the bandage closed. He stood, reached down. She took his hand, firmly this time. They moved forward, deeper into the station perimeter. The next dome was still intact. Maybe. It didn't matter. She was walking under her own strength. And for the first time since Site 14 burned, Valari wasn't just surviving. She was moving towards something. The intact dome was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no echoing alarms. Just the heavy stillness of emergency shutdown. Whatever power remained was running low. The ambient lights pulsed faintly overhead, flickering with fatigue. Steam drifted from floor vents. The walls were streaked with moisture. Edwin scanned the junction map embedded in the corridor panel. Most of it had burned out, but the lower left quadrant still glowed. He traced a route with 2 fingers. There's a surface access shaft 3 levels up. If the stabilizers held, we can breach it and climb to the outer causeway. Valari leaned against a pillar, catching her breath. She wasn't winded, not exactly, but the adrenaline was wearing thin, and the weight of the prosthetic, while manageable, was still a constant drain. We'll need oxygen masks if we go outside, she said. I have 2 in my backup kit. One's old, but clean. She nodded. They moved through the abandoned access hall, sidestepping a broken loader unit and a toppled cart of shattered solar plates. Most of the vendors who worked this dome had already fled or hadn't made it out. What happens after this? She asked suddenly. Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet against the hum of the emergency lights. Edwin didn't look at her right away. He kept walking. Find a clean dome. Start over. Set up somewhere with low foot traffic. Fix things. Build limbs for people who can't afford proper ones. And me? She asked. He stopped. Turned. Whatever you want. You walk out of here, it's your life again. The words struck deep. Not because they were romantic. Because they were real. She studied his face, his calm posture, the subtle weight in his shoulders, the way he spoke like every word had already been thought through twice. You're not waiting for anything from me, are you? She asked. No. You're not pretending not to. No. She looked away, jaw tight. Then why does that scare me more than if you were? His answer came slowly, but clear. Because no one's ever given you space to choose. She didn't respond. She couldn't. They kept walking. The access shaft was sealed, but only partially. The outer bolt had blown during a pressure drop. Edwin managed to force the panel back with a crowbar and short blast from a handheld torch. Behind it was a ladder running 3 levels straight up. He pointed at her thigh. You ready for this? She nodded. It's gonna hurt. Yeah. She went first. Each rung sent vibrations through her hips. The prosthetic adjusted with every step, micro-calibrating the angle, responding to the force input from her nerves. It worked, but it hurt. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't slow. By the time she reached the top hatch, sweat ran down her spine. She hit the release and shoved upward. The hatch resisted, then gave way with a shriek of metal. Cold air poured in. She pulled herself up onto a metal platform exposed to the surface sky. It was dark purple overhead. Clouds swirled in low, thick bands. The sun was a smear through pollution haze, casting a dirty silver light across the skeletal remains of towers in the distance. Edwin came up behind her. They stood in silence. Welcome back to the world, he said. She turned slowly. The view wasn't beautiful. It wasn't clean or peaceful or anything she used to dream about while in uniform. But it was open, free, real. Her voice came out steadier than expected. I don't want to go separate ways. Edwin looked at her. You sure? I don't know what comes next, but I don't want to figure it out alone. He nodded once, not like a man accepting an offer, like someone acknowledging a decision already made. They moved toward the edge of the platform. Below was the elevated transit path, cracked but still standing. Beyond that, a cluster of hab pods powered by independent generators. Small lights flickered there, people still alive, still surviving. She breathed slowly. Her hand brushed his. He didn't take it. Not yet, but he didn't pull away. They walked forward, together. Behind them, the dome's final pressure warning began to sound dull, distant. Ahead, the wind was colder, but her leg held strong, and so did she. The hab pods on the outskirts were old, pre-collapsed modular shelters once used by dome engineers. Most had long been abandoned, but a few flickered with weak power, their outer lights blinking like slow heartbeats in the cold. Edwin scanned them quickly. Two were clearly locked down. One was wide open, torn apart by scavengers. But the last, Pod 14B, stood intact, door sealed, signal light blinking yellow. Could be functional, he said. Valari didn't reply. She was focused on her footing, every step deliberate. Her body was exhausted, not from running, but from endurance. Each motion reminded her of who she used to be and what her body was now relearning. Edwin approached the pod's door and connected a bypass clip from his toolkit. The lock disengaged after 30 seconds. The seal hissed as pressure equalized, and the hatch creaked open. The interior was small, one narrow room with a wall panel generator, a bunk, a storage locker, and a rusted sanitation alcove. Clean enough to rest, warm enough to breathe without a mask. Valari stepped inside and finally let herself sit. Her back hit the pod wall, and her breath caught, not from pain but from release. For the first time since the dome alarms went off, they weren't running. Edwin closed the hatch behind them and checked the power gauge. Internal heat's stable. Air's thin but safe. She peeled off the outer layer of her thermal wrappings. Beneath them, her body was taut, stronger than she had felt in months, but still healing. The violet tone of her skin had returned to its natural sheen. The prosthetic leg, now dusty and scuffed, still gleamed faintly along the etched lines of her unit name. She traced them with one finger while he unpacked a ration packet from his bag. He looked over at her after a few moments. "You're shaking." She forced a small breath, still catching up to what's happened. He sat on the floor beside her. It was a long 3 days. It felt like 3 years. A silence settled, less from exhaustion now, more from something waiting in the space between them. A kind of quiet that had weight. She turned to him. "I've slept near people since I lost my leg. In bunk corners. In Skavran shelters. In ducked alleys with knives under my head. Always waiting for someone to touch me wrong. Or not touch me at all. You never did either. I don't need to be owed anything," he said. "Not ever. That's what I don't understand." He nodded once, slowly, then asked, "What do you want from me?" Her voice was flat, real, no fear, just a need for clarity. He looked up. The truth. Yes. He looked straight at her. "I want you to rest. I want to wake up tomorrow and hear you moving around, already complaining about the leg being too tight. I want to know you got out of that place and made it back to the version of yourself you thought was gone. And if you want to stay, I won't stop you." She searched his expression. There was no tension in his voice, no layered intent. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to prove a point. He simply meant it. She leaned forward slowly, pressing her hand against his chest. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked. "Should I be? You've seen me angry, broken, bleeding. I've also seen you stand when your leg shouldn't have held. Watched you climb out of a collapsing corridor. I don't scare easy." She hesitated. Her hand slid down, not demanding, just resting against his stomach, where his muscles tensed beneath the fabric. "I haven't chosen someone in a long time," she whispered. "Then choose," he said. "But not because you're cold. Not because you're scared." She looked up, eyes sharp now. "I'm not scared. Not of this." And then she kissed him. There was no soft music, no scripted lighting, just the press of skin, warm breath, hands that didn't grasp but steadied, bodies leaning without urgency, as if testing whether trust could take weight. She pulled back, only slightly. "I'm not a gift," she said quietly. "I know. I don't want to be saved." "You weren't." They undressed slowly. Nothing theatrical, just practical. Her outer wrap was peeled away, his jacket pulled off one arm at a time. He was scarred across the ribs. She didn't flinch. Her thigh was covered in graft scars. He didn't stare. They lay together in the narrow bunk. The space barely held them both. Their bodies found a rhythm not driven by urgency, but presence. His touch didn't ask. Hers didn't apologize. In the quiet afterward, she pressed her face into the crook of his shoulder. Her voice was raw. I didn't think I could feel like this again. Human. Whole. You are, he said. You always were. She didn't answer. She just stayed there, with his heartbeat under her ear and her hand resting over the curve of her prosthetics connector port. By morning, the dome had gone completely silent. But they had each other, and breath. And that was enough. They left the pod at first light. The sky above Gorath, 7 had cleared slightly. Less smog. The light, though pale, reached through the broken atmosphere in streaks of clean silver. It was the first time either of them had seen sunlight in days. Valari moved steadily. No limp, no hitch in her step. The prosthetic adjusted to the uneven ground with each footfall. Her back was straight, her shoulders loose. Edwin walked beside her, a satchel slung over one shoulder, his steps calm and quiet. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Ahead, past a broken cargo tram track, the Habridge sloped downward toward the dry lowlands. An old transfer zone, mostly sand now, with rusted transport husks and broken fences marking where the edge of civilization used to be. Beyond that was what Edwin called the Clean Zone, a small, unofficial settlement near the edge of Dome 2's old perimeter. Power, water, and most importantly, autonomy. No one owned anyone there. No one tracked you. If you could work, you stayed. As they walked, Valari glanced sideways. What will you tell them when we get there? That I'm a fixer. You're my partner. You mean assistant? No, partner. She smirked. Just like that. He nodded. Just like that. They reached the edge of the bluff around midday. From there, the settlement came into view, 30 or 40 units spread across the flat rock basin. Solar collectors blinked from rooftops. Smoke trails curled up from a few chimneys. The smell of heat-treated metal drifted in the wind. Edwin checked the charge on his transponder, then tucked it away. Should take us another hour. Valari didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her leg, then at her hands, then at him. You know I'm not fixed, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to be. I still flinch sometimes. I freeze when I hear machinery hiss. I wake up ready to fight. I know. You don't care. He turned to her. I care that you're honest. That's it. She let that settle inside her. The wind picked up slightly. She pulled her outer wrap tighter around her waist and stepped forward again, this time not to follow, but to lead. By the time they reached the outer checkpoint of the settlement, dust covered their boots and sweat lined their collars. A woman at the gate checked their gear. No scans, just eyes. You two running from something? She asked. Edwin replied first. No, running to something. The woman smirked and waved them through. The first person they met inside was a boy missing an arm at the elbow. He looked up at Edwin's toolkit and pointed. You fix stuff? He asked. Sometimes, Edwin said. Can you fix people? Edwin looked at Valari. She answered instead. Yes, she said. He can. By nightfall, they had been offered a shared unit, small but private, a fold-down bed, basic hydro access, a view of the ridge. Later, when the sun dipped low and the settlement lights flickered on, Valari sat on the edge of the bed, watching the horizon. Edwin stood nearby, unpacking their gear. Neither said much. The quiet was comfortable now. Finally, she spoke. You still want me here? He looked at her like she'd asked whether oxygen was necessary. I didn't bring you this far to leave you behind. Her voice lowered. You didn't bring me anywhere. I walked. He smiled, a rare thing. Then stay, he said. Not because you need to, because you want to. She stood, walked to him, and put her hands on either side of his chest. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. I do. Their kiss was slower this time. Familiar. Their hands moved without tension. It wasn't survival anymore. It wasn't barter. It was simple. She wanted this. Him. Now. That night, In the quiet room under a working roof, she lay beside him, eyes open. "I feel like me again," she said. "You never stop being you," he replied. The next morning, she woke before him. She walked outside barefoot, prosthetic humming softly under her knee, and stood at the ridge alone. The air was cold, real, and for the first time since Sight 14, she didn't just feel like someone who escaped death. She felt like someone who had found her life again. She turned back toward the doorway, where Edwin now stood watching her, half-dressed, coffee in hand, face calm. She walked back to him. No limp, no shame, just choice. The day started slow, quiet for once in the best way. No alarms, no wind cutting through cracked domes. Just the low murmur of tools being used a few buildings down and the sound of heat vents exhaling warm air across the outer walkway. Valari stood in front of the mirror inside their shared unit. The morning light cut across the wall and hit her skin in long, soft lines. She had a towel wrapped around her chest and another around her waist. Her hair, still damp from washing, hung down in tangled white strands that brushed her collarbone. Edwin was outside, adjusting one of the solar panels on the roof. He didn't rush. Neither of them did anymore. Today wasn't about survival. It wasn't about climbing out of a broken world. It was about coffee, about walking through the outpost without thinking about every step, about getting grease on her fingers from fixing a broken heater, about trading a cooked meal for an old radio that Edwin immediately started rewiring just for fun. They ate together at the edge of the ridge, seated on two stacked supply crates. The basin below stretched wide and quiet. Other settlers moved in the distance, familiar faces now. No one looked at Valari like she was broken anymore. No one asked about the leg. She was just part of this place. When the sun lowered behind the far rocks and the temperature began to dip, she stood and stretched. Her muscles didn't ache like they used to. The prosthetic didn't grind or drag. It moved with her, balanced, beautiful. Back inside, she changed into a thin gray tunic, loose, sleeveless, and just long enough to brush the top of her thigh. The synthetic fabric clung in places where her body curved, catching light with each motion. She left her hair down, let it dry naturally. Edwin was leaning over the counter, reading one of the old maintenance logs someone had salvaged. When she entered, he glanced up. She didn't say anything, just walked up behind him and placed her hand at the small of his back. "You've been watching me all day," she said. He closed the tablet. "I like what I see." She stepped in front of him. "I want to share more than just shelter tonight." Edwin straightened slowly. His eyes didn't drop to her body. He looked at her face first. Always her face. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm not offering anything," she said. "I'm choosing. Because I want you. And because I trust you." He reached up, brushing a lock of white hair behind her ear. "Then come here," he said quietly. She moved into his arms without hesitation. Their kiss was slower than the last time. Less about need, more about knowing, touching each other not as strangers seeking comfort, but as people finally safe enough to be soft. His hands slid down her back, fingertips tracing the tension lines in her skin. She arched against him, feeling the warmth between their bodies build. Not fast, not rushed, just constant. When he guided her toward the bed, she paused, unwrapped the cloth at her waist. The prosthetic leg was exposed now, smooth, matte alloy that caught the light. Etched still with her name, her unit, her story. She watched his reaction. He didn't flinch. He ran his fingers along the seam of the prosthetic where it met her thigh. Gently, carefully, then lower, until his hand was against the soft skin above the socket, her most sensitive place. She gasped. "You're not afraid to touch it?" she whispered. "I'm not afraid of any part of you," he said. "You made this leg yours. It's beautiful, like the rest of you." Her throat tightened. She climbed onto the bed, guiding him with her, the weight of his body settling over hers. One of her hands stayed on his shoulder. The other slipped down his chest. Their bodies pressed, skin to skin, warm and firm and patient. When he entered her, it was slow, deep, not cautious but deliberate. Her breath hitched, not from pain, but from the weight of it, from the feeling of being fully seen, fully held. Her hips adjusted, her leg locking gently in place, humming faintly beneath them. It didn't interrupt their rhythm. It became part of it. She moved with him, not despite the prosthetic, but with it. It held her, grounded her, reminded her of how far she had come, what she had earned, what she had chosen. Their bodies moved in quiet unison. No words, just breath and small sounds, skin brushing metal, heartbeat against heartbeat. Later, they lay together under a single blanket. Her head rested on his chest, one leg draped over his hip, the prosthetic humming faintly at the edge of stillness. He traced his fingers along her spine. "You feel different now." "I'm different now," she said, "but I'm still me." "And you're still here," he said. She nodded. "And I'm not leaving."